I'm giving every Asian nation the maximum possible youth rating in Football Manager 2023, and then I'm going to simulate forward 100 years to see what happens. And by every Asian nation, I mean the 9 Asian nations that I have here. In the normal version of Football Manager, there are only 8. It's Australia, China, Hong Kong, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, and South Korea. But I've also used the pregame editor to add in the Philippines, as this is the Filipino FM channel, so I couldn't do an Asian Football Manager experiment without including the Philippines. So I'm going to load up this database, and then we are going to get things moving along. All right, we are into the game, and I have given each of those Asian nations the maximum possible youth rating. So I've gone in and used the in-game editor, and under generated players, we have youth rating, and I've given the maximum 200 youth rating. So youth rating goes from 1 to 200, 1 being the lowest, 200 being the highest. So in theory, the Philippines should now be generating some of the highest potential players in the world, along with the rest of the Asian countries that we mentioned earlier. So, for example, here we have Australia. Looking at them, they have a 200 youth rating. Here is China, once again, who have that 200 youth rating. Looking at Hong Kong as well, another one of our Asian nations coming in with that 200 youth rating. Here is South Korea, who actually already had a pretty decently high youth rating, but we've upped that to 200 as well. Here is Singapore, another nation with a 200 youth rating. We have also given India another 200 youth rating. And finally, we have Malaysia, who again, using the in-game editor, we've given a 200 youth rating. So those are the 9 countries that we have given, the 9 Asian countries that we have given a 200 youth rating to. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens. I am really hoping that these Asian nations do well and we see some of the top players in the world coming from these Asian nations. So we're going to start off, we're going to do a 100-year simulation total. Let's go 10 years into the future first. I don't think we'll see much then, but then we'll go 50 and 100 years into the future to see what has happened. So we are going to go forward 10 seasons, and I will see you all in 2032. Welcome back. We are in the year 2032, 10 years into the future, and it doesn't look like anything has changed particularly. England, Norway, and Holland winning the last few World Cups. No Asian country there. So nothing new, perhaps, on the world stage at this point. Additionally, not a whole lot new in the Asian Nations Cup, with South Korea, Japan, and Thailand being the most recent winners. Again, it's only been 10 years, so there's not a whole lot for our countries have been able to develop a lot of players and for that maximum youth rating to really be able to be implemented. I'm also always curious to see if there are any high rated, high transfer valued youngsters, but I don't see anyone here. It doesn't look like there are any ones from any of the countries that we looked at earlier. The only one who it seems is a new regen, Claudio Di Benedetto. So he's from Australia, and he looks like to be the best youngster coming out of any of our countries. 182 current ability, 182 potential. He looks like maybe the one that has really benefited from that 200 maximum youth rating. And my word, he's good. Look at that holy trinity. This is an amazing forward. Wow. And he is, yep, and sure enough, he came up through Australia after we changed that youth rating, and he has been absolutely phenomenal in the past 10 seasons. And the last thing that I kind of wanted to look at briefly was like the World Player of the Year and Types Award. I'm not expecting anything from the World Player of the Year, but we will look at that later. I'm curious about the Next Gen and the Under 21 Footballer of the Year awards. So looking through, let's just start from 2022. No surprise to see Pedri, Jude Bellingham. These are all real players. This is the first one where we don't have a real player. This is the first time we're looking at some regens. I don't see anyone from any of the countries we mentioned before. Same thing in 2028, 29. A little bit disappointing, nothing there either. Nothing in 2030. So really nothing yet. Let's look at the next gen as well. Iranian is interesting. We have whoever this Moroccan guy is, he must be absolutely outstanding for his age. Arno Adam here, he's Belgian, Dutch. It doesn't look like we have any from the ones we were looking at before. And just continuing down a little bit more. Yep. So nothing really happening in the world yet. This is 10 years into the future, 50 years into the future. I think we would expect to see a bit more. So let's jump ahead to 50 years from the start of the save, and we will see how we're doing then. Well, I'm in the year 2075, a little over 50 years, and we were so close to having one of our teams win the World Cup. Australia finishing runners-up in the 2074 World Cup. But I think the biggest surprise of this save is, how good is South Africa at this point? My word, they're phenomenal, winning the last two World Cups. That is I'm just curious to see who some of their players are, because, wow. I mean, okay, that is quite a good player there. I'm surprised to see at how well South Africa is doing. So, I mean, just looking through, geez, wow, they have some phenomenal players, my word. So South Africa is really good. Australia finished second, though. That's not too bad. Let's look and see who are some of their best players. So our captain here is Matt Murphy, who's okay. This is the team that I don't see anyone playing on like really big clubs. I'm really surprised here. This guy's pretty good. He's won. What is this? He made the final of the World Cup. I mean, their key players are just average. Let's actually look at their team. If we sort by transfer value, we have one guy with a huge transfer value, plays for Dortmund. He's quite good. But as far as everyone else is concerned, this guy, who I think we saw earlier, I'm surprised that Australia made the final of the World Cup, because they don't look brilliant. They lost on a penalty shootout. Oh, man. We almost had an Asian winner here, or at least from the Asian, Confederation. I'm really surprised at how well they've done. Like, looking at some of their players, this is the guy, I mean, he's got great free kick taking. Has that really weaponized? But, all right, we have this guy from Bayern here. This guy looks a lot better, so that's good. They're not brilliant, though. Like, there's no one on this team who I think is, like, lighting it up. But they went on a good run, and oh, man, we were so close. So close. So looking through that last World Cup, if we go to the third place playoff, was Brazil-Argentina. Semifinals, we kind of saw that there. It doesn't look like we have Australia here, but it doesn't look like our other Asian nations are doing particularly great. Japan, who actually didn't help that much, was in the third round. South Korea in the third round, but they did lose to Australia. That's unfortunate. But I don't see any of our other nations, really. Do we have any of them in here? China made it. That's decent. I don't see anyone else, really, though. Japan's doing really well. That's good to see. Maybe that's been good as well. But I don't see any of our other Asian nations, which is maybe a little bit just Thailand's doing really well. But I don't see like the Philippines. I don't see Malaysia, Singapore, any of those countries. Let's go and see maybe what some of the best players in the world are looking like. So I'm curious to see. So this is the World Player of the Year award. And I don't see any from any of the countries that we were looking at. Oh, we do have a Chinese player. All right, we have a Chinese player who looks phenomenally good. My word, 185. So we have a Chinese player who is part of it. And sure enough, they came up through. They would be a benefit of that maximum youth rating. So that is interesting to see. But otherwise, it doesn't really look like there are a whole lot of players on that end. We have a Swedish player winning it. But yeah, just clicking through briefly, I don't see any other players from any of our other countries. So looking at the next gen again, not really. I mean, they're all kind of European players, a lot of Belgian and Dutch players, but unfortunately, I'm not seeing. I'm a little disappointed. I was hoping to see, Australian. This is one of the guys that we saw earlier. But unfortunately, I don't see any from maybe some of our other countries. Kosovan, wow. Again, looking at the under 21 player of the year, nothing really there. Interesting that there's a few Iranian players who have done well in this save. We have an Israeli player there, our Australian player there again. But yeah, otherwise, not really seeing a whole lot from, our other countries. And just quickly looking for some of the highest transfer value players in the world. If we sort by transfer value, not seeing a whole lot of players from the countries that we are interested in, unfortunately. It seems like Australia has been the main beneficiary of us changing their youth rating, and maybe a little bit South Korea as well. Actually, if we go to the Asian Nations Cup and we look at that real quick, actually, Qatar winning it most recently. But looking at the past winners, Australia's benefited, South Korea's benefited, but really, I don't know. I guess our other countries haven't really done so well. It's a little bit disappointing. Well, that's 50 years into the future, halfway through. We're going to jump ahead to our 100-year into the future time point, and let's see how things are looking then. Welcome back. We are 100 years into the future, actually a little over 100 years, 102 years, and we have not had another Asian nation come close to winning the World Cup. Australia came close in 2074 with probably an underdog team, but otherwise, yeah, there's not really much here to report, unfortunately. None of the teams that we gave that really great youth rating to have done very well. We're in 21 or 21, 25. That's such a weird one to say. But if you go to the overview, let's go look at the previous World Cup just to see where our Asian nations came if they were in it. So South Africa's been phenomenal in the World Cup. My word. All right, quarterfinal, any teams there? Man, we didn't even have any teams in the quarterfinal. What about the third round? Anything there? Oh, man. I was really hoping that Asian nations would do really well. Burkina Faso made it. Would do really well, but I'm not even seeing any of our Asian nations, really. Korea? There we go, South Korea. But that's it. Where's Australia? What happened to Australia? Let's look at the groups. Japan, we didn't give one to. New Zealand. This is honestly, I'm a little sad. This turned out a little not as well as I thought it would. I don't even see Australia in here. Well, that's a little disappointing. Well, very interestingly, though, it's been much different in the Asian Nations Cup because South Korea have dominated the Asian Nations Cup, and we had Malaysia winning it, who was one of those countries that we gave the 200 youth rating to. It just doesn't seem to have translated over to the World Cup necessarily. Looking at the World Player of the Year awards, it doesn't seem like we had any from our Asian nations, unfortunately. I was kind of hoping that some of our Asian nations might win it, but just looking through, it doesn't seem like any of our Asian nations came particularly close. We have some Brazilians, Portuguese here. Wow, he was dominant, but nothing really from any of our Asian nations. A similar story as far as the next gen is concerned. It's predominantly come from European nations, which I guess isn't really a surprise. I was hoping that maybe if we had a really high potential youngster from one of our Asian nations that they would have made it in, but it doesn't seem like that's happened. Yeah, nothing there to report, really. I think we'll end by looking at some of our Asian nations and to see how they ended up 102 years into the future. So let's start off with South Korea, now ranked 22nd in the world. And they have some players at some big clubs. The most important going to be this guy here, who is a really good forward player. My word, 167 going to 182 at only 24 years old. He is still going to continue developing. He is absolutely phenomenal. But I don't see any other players really who match the standard of the player we just looked at. Moving on to China, now ranked 77th in the world, and it looks like we have one player who's playing in Italy who looks pretty decent. We also saw Dai Young earlier in the save, but I mean, he's okay. He's not brilliant. I don't see any other players who are particularly good. So maybe a little bit disappointing as far as that's concerned. Next off, we have Hong Kong. Nothing really there. I think we can move on. Australia is now ranked 66th in the world. At one point, we did see them, get pretty high, I guess as high as 42nd, but they did make the World Cup final. We have a few players playing at top leagues in Europe. Nathan Bolton stands out. It's okay. And we also have this guy, actually, he's a very good goalkeeper. He's 35, so I'm sure at one point he was better. We also have somebody playing in South Korea who looks pretty decent. And overall, some decent players, but I don't know if any of these players look particularly brilliant. India is now 123rd in the world. Maybe better than before, but overall, nobody really stands out here. A similar story for Singapore. Their key player is this guy here, and he's all right, but nothing really to write home about. We did see Malaysia win an Asian Nations Cup earlier, and they have risen all the way up to 73rd, which is pretty nice. And actually some pretty decent players. This guy looks pretty good for this level, and he is their key player. And we have some other players who are pretty decent for this level. You can see how they might have won an Asian Nations Cup, but as far as kind of a 200 youth rating and potentially being involved with the World Cup conversation, there's nothing really there. And last but not least, of course, we have my Philippines, who has actually gotten a lot better. World ranking 79th from 130th. There has been certainly an improvement over, 102 years. But I don't see us, competing with some of the best players in the world or really producing any of the best players in the world. This guy is our best player. He now plays for Kaya, and certainly for the Philippines, he looks good. 127 current ability is very high for a Filipino, especially someone playing in the Philippines. 90 caps and 52 goals. He's probably one of our best players of all time. But he never made it out of the Philippines. It doesn't look like we have anyone playing at the best leagues in Europe. We do have someone over at St. Louis City who's okay. But, nobody who I would say was, one of the best players in the world. Well, that's it for the leagues that we could load. We gave those Asian nations the maximum youth rating, and it didn't really do much, I would say. We did get Australia to a World Cup final, but overall, I don't think it had really much effect on the game or the world. The big surprise, of course, being, I think, South Africa. They were quite phenomenal in this save. But the exciting thing about this is I think we can do this again in Football Manager 2024 because we're going to have more Asian leagues in Football Manager 2024. Most notably, the inclusion of Japan as one of the leagues that we can load. And I think, between South Korea and Japan, giving them a maximum youth rating, Australia as well. I think if we do this again in a year, we might be able to see something much, much better than what we've seen right now. But until Football Manager 2024 comes out, this is what we've got. And overall, maybe a little bit disappointing, but you know what? Australia made a World Cup final. I'm pretty happy with that. Thank you for watching this video. I hope that you've enjoyed. I hope that you all are having a wonderful weekend, wherever you are. And I will see you all in the next video. Bye.